Good morning to all of you, and I welcome you to this 2 days workshop on instructional design for e-content development, which is being organized by the Indira Gandhi National Open University in collaboration with the British Council. For this inaugural session, we have with us our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Gopinath Pradhan. On his right, we have Mr. Charlie Walker, Director Programs from the British Council. Next to him is Professor Kyriaki Enegnopoulos, Head of E-Learning at the University of Bath, UK. On the extreme right, we have Professor Andrew Ravenscroft from University of East London, a psychologist and learning technologist there. Next to me is Ms. Gwen van der Velden, Director of Learning and Teaching Enhancement at the University of Bath. Before we start our proceedings, I request our Honorable Vice Chancellor to welcome the dignitaries with floral bouquets and felicitate them.
Start from this side? Yeah. Please stand up. Each one, okay? I am welcoming you.
Okay, thank you very much.
From this side?
Yes. Thank you very much. Let's have some time. Thank you. How beautiful.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
That will be convenient. No opening.
Thank you very much. Thank you. You're very kind.
This is a gesture from our side. This is sharp.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Yes.
Thank you. You're very kind. Thank you.
Matches my shirt, thank you very much. Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And a bouquet for you.
Oh, this is my
Thank you, sir. The proposal for this 2-day workshop was initiated by Sri Pawan Agarwal, Advisor, Higher Education Planning Commission, when we were having our meeting for ICT in education for the 12th plan proposal, in fact. Since he is in Australia right now, at the moment, and could not join us for this workshop, we would like to record our sincere gratitude to him for facilitating and initiating the whole program. The workshop actually proposes to build up awareness about effective ways to design learning content and techniques vital to creating successful e-content. The workshop sessions are planned to cover methodologies of effective instructional design, use of specific and appropriate development tools for e-content development, and strategies and techniques to support the iterative process of instructional design. Resource persons from UK and India working in the area of e-content development, instructional design and e-learning have been have been invited to conduct the sessions for the next 2 days, in fact. And the participants are from to invitation, and participants are drawn from different institutions across the country that are involved in e-content development, especially working in the project sponsored by the National Mission on Education through ICT. The existing facility of broadcasting, teleconferencing and webcasting of IGNU is being used for these 2 days workshop. Apart from the participants that we have in the studio here, which is around 50, we have more than 50 regional centers joining this workshop, and they will be interacting with us and participating in the workshop for these 2 days, in fact. The workshop is being telecast through IGNOU's Gyan Darshan channel 2, which is live, and also through the webcast mode. And we will be having a lot of interactions, and expecting that to come in from all directions, in fact. Now I request our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Gopinath Pradhan, to deliver the welcome address.
Okay, thank you, Uma. As the Vice Chancellor of the University, I welcome every one of you for this program. Before that, let me welcome all the members sitting in the dais. Welcome all the members, guests who are here for this occasion. Welcome the members of IGNOU family who are there here in this room, and others watching the program through our telecasting mechanism. In fact, all the regional centers, people are participating and watching the program. So, welcome you everybody. IGNOU by now is the largest university in the world, having around 2.6 million students on roll. We have around 67 regional centers who are supporting the headquarters and carrying on the mandate given to them for the different programs that we offer. And presently we offer around 490 programs to the students. We have 21 schools which have pioneered in developing these programs. Along with the schools, there are centers, and then our administrative structure continues with essentially the centers and schools operating from the headquarters, regional centers operating from the state level capitals and other places. In fact, we have 67 regional centers, which effectively means at least 2 centers in a state. There are almost 30 states in India now. And we have around 3,300 study centers, that is students support center, operating with around 50,000 counselors operating at the grassroots level to help the students. IGNOU started in 1985 with the basic objective of democratizing the education, which essentially meant for us reaching the students, reaching the learners at their doorstep. So we started with the undergraduate programs, went on to have master degree programs, then we are offering now doctoral programs with a number of extension programs. We are pioneer, in fact, the community college scheme. We started offering this program as a pilot basis in 2009. Now the Government of India is giving a shape to the community college scheme, where IGNOU is perhaps the only university in this country which has already experimented it and in the best position to carry it forward. So our objective is to reach the students, reach the learners with our programs, and address essentially the skill requirement of the society. And we not only meet our target here, but also we have extended the facility to many other countries outside India. In fact, we have almost 81 centers outside India operating for IGNOU and offering the programs, offering the services. Since this workshop is essentially a mechanism for us to develop different curriculum through e-learning materials, it will be useful to point out that we have the license for putting all our material in the public domain, so that everybody will have free access, get the benefit of the materials, well-developed materials, well-designed materials from our website. And we are perhaps one of the largest repository of the study materials, because we have a scheme called e-Gyan course, which not only has stored all the programs, that most of the programs that we are offering for our students in the digital mode for the use of the users, and these are essential in the public domain. We have the facilities by now, and we are practicing, in fact, to go entirely online in our programs, where starting from registration to conduct the examination is carried on through online. We have almost 21 to 27 programs which are experimented, and then we plan to strengthen these programs. Basic mandate now for us, not mandate, in fact it is our basic objective, is to switch over to the online offering of the programs, keeping in space with the technology that is evolving, and then this workshop is expected to help us in enriching our knowledge base, to help us catching up with the emerging technology, and help us developing the e-content. Welcome you once again to this program, and I hope the deliberations throughout the day today and most part of tomorrow will help us in coming out with some sharper intuition, sharper knowledge, and help us in going ahead with the task we have set for ourselves. Thank you once again to everybody present and watching the program through different modes of telecast. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. May I now request Mr. Walker, Director Programs, British Council of India, for the inaugural address, please.
Thank you. Thank you.
No, this one.
Okay, it won't come, so you have to read. It won't come, it won't be visible there.
No,
Okay,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
I'll speak though.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Professor Gopinath Pradhan, Vice Chancellor of IGNOU, for welcoming us all here. It's a great pleasure for me as Programmes Director at the British Council to be here today at what is actually my first visit to IGNOU, so it's particularly gratifying to be here. Thank you also to the full IGNOU team for their collaboration on this important workshop. We're always delighted to partner with IGNOU and impressed by the impact that the university has had in its 27-year history, as the Vice-Chancellor has just explained. IGNOU now reaches 2.6 million learners and has ambitious plans for expansion across India and beyond. And it can play a critical role in meeting a huge demand for higher education in India in the years to come. The British Council is all about partnerships. We are the United Kingdom's cultural relations organisation, and as such our primary objective is to develop lasting relationships between institutions in India and in the United Kingdom, and we do that through our work in the arts, in the English language and education. One of our programmes, Internationalising Higher Education, brings academics from the UK and India together to share experience, knowledge, and to collaborate in research and capacity building. And this workshop, our involvement in this workshop, forms part of that programme. Today, we're delighted to welcome 38 delegates from across India, 3 speakers from the United Kingdom, and 11 from India. And we give special thanks to our rapporteur, Ms. Kiran Bansal from IGNOU. We're also delighted to welcome all of the delegates tuning in different modes of communication across the country. IGNOU has a long history of partnership with Britain's Open University, and in a speech earlier this year when we hosted Martin Bean, the Vice-Chancellor of the Open University at the British Council earlier in the year, he echoed much of what the Vice-Chancellor of IGNOU has just explained to us. He was very enthusiastic about the vast amount of e-content that's available free on the internet and its potential to stimulate learning. But he emphasised that the key value add that institutions bring is in building the learning pathways around this content, helping the learner get the most out of the content available, as well as by providing mentoring, assessment, certification. So this workshop is very important for us. It aims to help developers and practitioners gain a better understanding of effective methods for designing and developing quality e-content for high impact results. And that impact, those results, we felt in the quality of graduates being produced in the universities and the skills that they have that take them into employment. I'm sure the workshop will lead to long-term knowledge sharing and collaboration between our two countries. So I'd like to end by thanking you all for being here. I know that there's been a lot of juggling of commitments to make this event possible, and I echo the thanks that Mr. Umar Kanjalal gave to Mr. Pavan Agarwal, the advisor at the Planning Commission, who has really been a driving force behind the development of this workshop. So I wish you all great success with your discussions over the next 2 days, and look forward to meeting many of you later. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Now it's actually my role is to just propose a formal vote of thanks before we end this session. Organizing any event like this requires a tremendous effort, and we are grateful to all those who have been involved in the planning and preparation for this workshop. But surely I would like to mention few names who were directly involved in this process. To start with, I would like to thank our Vice Chancellor for his guidance and support in organizing this program. Major role has been played by the British Council, our collaborator in this workshop. I would especially like to thank Director British Council, Mr. Rob Lynn, Mr. Walker, Ms. Manjula Rao, Ms. Shilpi Tripathi, Mr. Dhanashekaran, Ms. Ashima, and all others who helped us in organizing this event. I would like to thank Mr. Ravikant, Director EMPC, and all his staff for the excellent facility at this EMPC studio and technical support they are providing for the next 2 days workshop. We are really grateful to Dr. Shrikant Mahapatra, Director of RST, for all his support in coordinating the participation of the regional centers in this workshop. I would also like to thank Mr. Uday Singh Tolia, Registrar of IGNOU, and his staff, Mr. Lalit Mohan Pandey, Finance Officer, and his staff for all the logistics helps that were provided. We would also like to thank the Public Information Unit for the media coverage, staff of Horticulture Cell, Campus Maintenance Division, ACIL, and eGancoach, and all my colleagues in the university for their support in organizing this event. We are grateful to all the resource persons of the workshop who have come in the short notice, and also to the participants who are for their presence in this workshop. Thanks to all, one and all. And with this, we come to the end of this session, and we will be reassembling at 11:15, where the regular sessions, the proceedings will start. And the first session is on basic concepts and methodologies supporting instructional design in digital world, UK and India perspectives. So with this, I invite you all for a cup of tea outside the floor. Thank you.
He was looking in the wrong direction.
Welcome back to this first session of the workshop. The first session will cover basic concepts and methodologies supporting instructional design in digital world, where we will be having the perspectives from UK as well as India. We are pleased to have with us Mr. N.K. Sinha, Additional Secretary, Ministry of Human Resource Development, Government of India, and also he is the Mission Director for National Mission on Education through ICT. We are pleased to welcome you, sir, in this session. And may I now request you, sir, to brief the audience about the National Mission on Education on ICT, the NME ICT, and also the activities of eContent development therein. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to all of you. Let me begin whatever I have to say with one sentence, that content is critical resource in the digital world of knowledge. How do we achieve it? How do we disseminate it? That is relatively simpler. But to create a content which is proactive, which can just hit the bullseye wherever it is needed, whenever it is needed, that is a challenge which all of us need to attend to. So while we are moving on that track, we have a very ambitious mission called the National Mission on Education through ICT in Government of India, and funding is not a problem there. What we had in 11th plan was 4,600 crores, close to $1 billion, and we had, for the asking, anybody who would like to do something innovative, funding was and will continue to be readily available. What we started with were two simple cardinal principles: that no talent in the country should be allowed to go waste. It's a very big statement. We have still not reached there, but at least that is one of the goals. And second was, e-content should be available free of cost to all learners, irrespective of whether they are lifelong learners, whether they are students or somebody just trying to pick up some skill. Irrespective of that, it should be the mission which will fund that, which will pick up the bills for that, but to the learner it should be free. Then we need three things if we want to move in that direction: content, connectivity, and devices. Content, we all are here to discuss the concepts and methodologies supporting instructional design in digital world. Unless there is a proper, appropriate instructional design, the content may be there for the name of content, but it may not be that relevant, and maybe the students, when it comes to them to use, will find, oh, it is too time consuming and I don't have time. We have so much of knowledge, and knowledge is exploding at such a rate that to package everything is a challenge, and it cannot be any longer a case that everything is packaged and within the same given times of 2 years, 3 years or 4 years, leading to a bachelor or even a postgraduate degree, everything is understood by a student. It will never happen. So the basics have to be understood, and then the modules have to be left. We also have to cater to various learning styles of students and learners, various intellectual capabilities. Why should we think that my lecture is aimed at the middle of the class? What happens to those who are at the bottom of the class? What happens to those who are at the top of the class? Are we then optimal in designing these things? What should be added so that the toppers of the class will benefit from the same time spent? The laggards in the class will also raise their standard within the same time possible. What we have been doing and what we intend to achieve is still far, far away from what we have in mind. The kind of just-in-time kind of philosophy. If you need something with the given background, the computer program should identify what all modules do you need and then deliver that. Delivery is a relatively much simpler technique than creating this kind of proactive content which is suitable and which is modular in nature and doesn't take much time for people to grasp, and it builds up step by step so that a person who needs it in time is not having to waste 1 year to learn. That perhaps is the challenge, and that perhaps will be deliberated upon in this gathering. Of course, the other two are connectivity and devices, in which we have made substantial progress. When we started this mission, there were 419 universities in the country. Today, all those, barring 5 or 10, have been provided 1 gigabit per second connectivity in the country under this mission. And when we started, there were 18,000 colleges. Of course, the colleges have grown in number to 32,000, but today we have 19,000 colleges connected with up to 10 megabits per second of connectivity. So while we have been able to achieve what we started with, but then this is an expanding field and the numbers are growing. So we will continue to chase that and ensure that all educational institutions in the country, at least in the higher education domain for which this mission operates, get connected at the soonest possible time. And now we have been given another challenge. Each university has been given 1 gigabit per second of connectivity, and each college up to 10 megabits per second of connectivity. In the 12th plan, we have to achieve for each university 10 gigabits per second of connectivity, and for each college 1 gigabit per second of connectivity. So for the colleges it is 100 times expansion, and for the universities it is 10 times expansion. While technically it is feasible and it can be done within the resources available, but then the other thing will be, do we have this kind of content which is engrossing, which is interesting, that the usage picks up. There is no point in providing 10 gigabits per second of connectivity and people barely able to utilize 100 megabits per second. So this has to, while on one hand the supply is being pumped in, the demand has to grow, and there is no other way for the demand to pick up than to create relevant, appropriate and very timely interventions through the content. And this challenge, I am sure, will be deliberated upon here. So this is the kind of perspective from the government side. We do hope that some solutions will start emerging. When I look at the entire plethora of e-resources available over the net, including those created under the National Mission on Education through ICT, under NPTEL, under CEC or UGC, we do find that though we harp upon a 4-quadrant approach where we have the lecture notes, we have the audiovisual presentations, the lectures, the animations, simulations, access to relevant websites on the net, and self-evaluation, etc., etc. For a diverse variety of learners, perhaps we have not yet attempted that kind of pixelization, let me say, where I can just add various pixels and create a new paradigm for that learner, which is specific to that learner. Taking an example from medical field, now instead of having medicines which will only attempt to cure the symptoms, we have gone much deeper, and even we have started putting medicines which will attack that range of cells or that area where the disease may be. If we can go that way, even the e-contents have to be tailored that way. So I don't know anything of XYZ. I need to know it within 2 days. The computer should tell me, here is the listing, here is the time you should spend, and go through this path, and then you will be able to solve this kind of problem. Obviously, that solution, that complexity, etc., is being attempted under Washington Accord and many other accords. But then we are still far, far away from this kind of approach. Every module need to be calibrated and told for this level, for this kind of intervention in this much time, this is the level enhancement. This will also have to be followed by very continuous evaluation through a very strong learning management system, which will say, you are a student, these are your requirements. If you want your requirements to be enhanced, please tell us, and then a clear-cut path emerges and those modules are flown in. I think if we move in those directions, it will synergize with our efforts. Otherwise, perhaps we would have reached 1 or 2 steps ahead, but the kind of knowledge explosion that is happening and the demands that will be made by the learners will still be lagging behind that kind of expectation. Here is the expectation boom. With the ICT, are we able to cater to it? And in the end, ultimately everything hinges around this kind of content. And I am sure some progress would be made in these kinds of workshops, these kinds of brainstorming sessions, and in the end, if not the content, at least we may have the path to move in through which we can get these things realized, so that it gets perfect synergy with what we are doing and what we are getting from the intellectual calibers of our academia worldwide. Perhaps then mankind could say, if knowledge is exploding in that manner, we are also having techniques to see that our minds are able to grasp it and properly utilize that knowledge for further enhancing the goals of humanity. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now the floor is open. If you have any questions in the audience here in the studio, as well as those who are present in the regional centers. So we can have questions from you in comments. Yeah, please.
I'm Vasuki Belwadi from University of Hyderabad. As the National Mission on Education and ICTs, does the mission also have a plan of introducing academic programs on instructional design and developing e-learning content through the existing university system? Because we can't keep relying on external people all the time, and we need to build some self-reliance. And therefore, are there plans for the mission to introduce any such programs within the university systems?
Yes, the mission is not constrained by any kind of boundaries. If anything can be called knowledge, and this, whatever you are describing, is also knowledge, it can be covered. So we only need volunteers who are willing to work in that area. You have to pass the thresholds. There is a peer group review, but then if it helps in whatever is being articulated, why not? That is where I had said, for the kind of initiatives that one wants to take in this area, funding is not an issue. Please do join us. This is a collaborative effort, not only India centric. It should happen for the whole world. But then please put forth your ideas, and you will not find resources to be lacking.
Any other comments? And anyone from the regional centers? Yeah.
Three specific questions.
Just a second.
Three specific questions. Number one, is it possible on the part of this national mission to bring all those eContent providers in single platform? See, UGC is having, NCERT is having, IGNOU is having, so many other private providers also. Is it possible to bring in common platform?
Answer is yes.
And if it is yes, second question comes in terms of standardization. because not that all providers having the common standard and the common target group, and you told it will be for each one and everyone. If we are to make in a common platform, what kind of sorting out, looking at the various kind of target group, if it at all makes a sense. Number 3, we may be having volumes of encyclopedia in the country. That hardly means everybody will be using the encyclopedia. You have widely nicely talked about expectation boom. There is a supply boom. There should be a demand boom on the part of the side. A country when you find more than 75% of the population only literate, only 14% of the people going to the higher education. How do you expect this kind of a rich content can be made mass based? Please don't condition me with all this kind of
That is being recorded. Other people cannot hear you otherwise. There are 40 remote centers.
You say that technology is so developed, they will be able to catch me.
I can't get you.
Now the question is that if it is possible to make it so much target oriented so that an amount of certification based on the needs, certification, there will be some specific technical need, there will be specific, we call it vocational education, there will be high education, there will be technical education. If it is possible to classify, keeping in mind future need of certification. So if it is possible, how we are going to learn all these things?
Yes, what you are saying is well understood. If we don't have digitally empowered learner population, how does the demand grow? For that, the mission has a massive infusion of funds, let me say of the order of 200 crores plus, to make the students and teachers digitally literate and then digitally empowered. Once they know the power of this technology, then only they will know, oh yes, this is possible, so I should demand it. Second is,
Yeah, Nagpur, please come in. Can we have Nagpur, please?
Good morning, sir and madam. Yes, I want to know whether you pick measures to reach to rural and tribal areas under this NPTEL.
There's disturbance. Can you just repeat? Can you please repeat the question, please?
Disconnected. You may continue, please.
Yeah, I think he was talking about reaching out rural areas or something.
yes, so for reaching out the rural areas, one person should be able to know how to access the content. The second part is the content should be available in and around that person. So the colleges are already there. The colleges have the Wi-Fi hotspots. What we are also attempting under this mission is using the college connectivity as the backhaul. We create Wi-Fi hotspots in the student homes at a very nominal fee of maybe 60 to 80 rupees per year for a 256 kbps connectivity. And those experiments are going on. And we have been able to establish that in a wide area, 3 to 5 kilometers away from the college, in some village. This is the cost. If that starts happening, the students with Akash devices or other devices have the opportunity to log on to the net and get what is there. The certification is very important. Knowing where you stand, apart from certification, is also important. And if there are more questions, you can then place them later.
Yeah.
We would be developing
Just a second.
knowledge base. Definitely we are developing, and we all academia would be involved in that. Now keeping because you would be creating the entire repository and it would be freely available, keeping in view the sensitivities of the contents. Particularly I am from history, and we know that how in India we are, even for writing a small sentence or adding just that this article the student can consult. So who would be taking care of these sensitivity, whether the ministry would take care, because the litigation would there, then the individual lecturer or reader or professor, if we keep on involved in all these litigation and giving answers to the parliament, it would be too much on our side. So who would be taking care of all these things? Because we as a IGNOU already we and even NCRT, they are facing in and out for our print material, even writing one word or one sentence, why you have included this and why you have not included that. So who would be taking care of all these things?
No, there is nothing like who else. It is the academia itself will have to address these questions. Today it is happening because a limited set is involved in that. Others are saying, all right, whatever has been developed is good. When tomorrow the peer group starts getting involved, when the development of the course material is not confined to 5 or 10 people, it is done through a wiki where everybody who is knowledgeable in that area participates. These things will get filtered out. There cannot be a regulatory mechanism which will keep on checking word by word, and there can be no end to ingenuity of somebody raising a question, because disagreements are very common and they should happen. Intellectually the disagreements will happen. But if the entire peer group in that area has seen through it, has vetted it, and has said this is what we feel it is, who is the third person to enter in? So I think this culture will have to grow. Today it is coming on a particular individual or a group. Tomorrow it will happen that the entire group has vetted it, then perhaps the objections will not be there, and if at all there are some objections, the entire group will defend. So the problem will be sorted out. Obviously it is a very complex design, but we are moving in that direction.
Okay, thank you, sir. Now we'll take it up later on, perhaps. We move on to, is it a short question if it is just a comment?
I'm Manjula Rao from British Council. Just wanted your views, sir, about where you see the international academic community making a contribution.
No, knowledge is not confined by countries' boundaries, and whenever we are saying this is regarding knowledge, we are including everyone. Our platforms, our thinking is that everyone should be participating. So international community most welcome to come, contribute, and when we are saying we are going to put it for free, it is for free for the entire nations in the world. So it is not being bounded by India-centric approach. We want contributions to, and we want contributions to flow out. So it is a question of give and take. Why should we repeat and create the same content using our resources if it has been done by some other country? Why don't we exchange? We learn from each other and we share. That kind of philosophy which we have in the open source or open access philosophy, that has to be followed. Otherwise we all will be in our cocoons and nothing much would be available within a given time frame and resources, and perhaps we will be wasting our time.
Thank you, sir. Now we move on to the next presentation. This is by Professor Kiyaki. Kiyaki is the head of e-learning at the University of Bath, UK. In her role, she leads the enhancement of learning and teaching through the use of technology, and her work aims to inform both institutional policy and practice. She has numerous published works, has led national projects in a peer-reviewed or academic journals, a steering member of the UK Head of E-Learning Forum, and coordinates the Higher Education Academy National Special Interest Group, which brings together the fields of e-learning and the first-year student experience. May I now request Professor Kiyaki to present.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to take part in this workshop on instructional design for e-content development. I am indeed honored to be here. In my presentation, I will introduce a few of the concepts and methodologies around instructional design. But the topic you've asked me to talk about is actually quite vast. I could be talking about a number of things. I could be talking about the frameworks and the models of instructional design, about the practical toolkits, about the pedagogical theory that underlines these models, scalability issues, sustainability issues, skills requirements, and the fact that we need interdisciplinary teams, but also resources and constraints, the need for appropriate technologies, and evaluation and quality assurance, but also leadership and vision within e-content development. So it's actually quite a large topic when we talk about instructional design. I have been working with instructional design for about 15 years now. And over these years, I've researched the concept. I've also built a number of models myself. I've experimented with them, and they have been produced and they have been used in distance learning courses that are being delivered around the world. And I will be presenting one of these models to you. There are many models, so I will only present one today and talk to you about the underlying theories behind it. Instructional design is simply not about the final product. It is about the process of learning. It is about all the decisions that we make. It is about the sequence of activities we ask our students to do. So the model that I'm presenting you today is called SCATE. It stands for Scope, Content, Activity, Thinking, and Extra. And it looks pretty simple as it is in its 5 columns there. And you'll see underneath that each column covers a number of things. So scope will tell the student, that section will tell the student a little bit about the context, about the big picture of what they're learning. It's going to inform them about the learning outcomes. It's going to tell them how long it will take them to actually go through this unit of study, the equipment, the software they might need with them at the time of study, any essential reading materials. Content is, of course, content. So the transmission of information that will help become knowledge eventually. Activities is where the students will engage with the content. They'll start doing things. The underlying principle is about learning by doing. We believe that students learn best when they engage and when they apply what they're learning. Thinking is an area where we allow students to reflect, not only reflect, but share with each other these reflections and make sense of the content and its application. Extra is literally extra. It's an extra session. It's for the students that didn't quite get it the first time, could be remedial, or it could be for those students that are well advanced and require more challenging activities or more challenging content. So it looks like a very linear model. It looks like a list of things, but it is much more than that. If a student wanted to, and if we set up our web pages appropriately and our content appropriately, they could go from one end to the other. However, depending on how we tag and how we create our websites, we can also say to students, well, you only have half an hour to engage with this, so why don't you go straight to the activities? And they can access just the activities. Or if they want to just reflect, they can go straight to the reflection. They don't need to go through the sequence that we have predefined for them. Another way of presenting the content is through the learning outcomes. We believe in telling students what it is they're going to learn. They want to know what they're going to achieve by engaging with the content up front. They want to know what they're going to be assessed on, and those learning outcomes actually make it very clear. So we could tag and group our content based on learning outcomes. So if a student would like to learn a particular thing, then they can access that information, that content, that activity, that topic of discussion, all as a group. So it's about the presentation of content in ways that will allow students to engage with it. Ideally, for this model, we want students to start off at the scope section. We want them to engage with a little bit of content, go and do some activities, come back, go and do some reflection, come back. Continue that loop again and again and again, however long is necessary, and then eventually, through the extra section, exit that unit of study. That unit of study could be 30 minutes long, it could be an hour long. I have created programs that are 300 study hours long. It really doesn't matter, it's independent of time. It's the structure that provides the opportunities for engagement. And all of that, all the web pages, all the way it's designed, then lives within a virtual learning environment, or you may call it a learning management system. Oops. Now, SCATE, just some of its characteristics, is unit-based, and a unit is as big as you want it to be. As I said, it could be an hour, it could be a couple of hundred hours, so it could be small or large. The fact that you create content based on a template, and I know some of you have already started doing this, provides clues to students as to the structure of the content and what the learning experience is going to be like. And by doing that, it increases the readability, comprehension, and also the retention of knowledge. It provides a suggested navigation path, but does not limit students to this path. As a minimum, it provides a checklist that we haven't forgotten anything, and students, when they're studying on their own, independently, self-paced, will have everything they need in order to engage effectively. So, as a minimum, it's a checklist. At a maximum, it could be amazing opportunities for engaging and learning. It goes some way, this model goes some way to achieving some of the requirements of our QAA processes for open and distance learning in the UK. And most importantly, it helps not only the students, but also those that are putting the materials together to focus on learning as a process rather than an end product. So I think it's quite a powerful model in that respect. Now, what makes it scalable, what makes it sustainable, is the way that we create content. There's a spectrum here. At one end of the spectrum, at the left-hand side, we can see that we can go down this route. All content is produced in-house by our own academics or by commissioned authors, and you create all the content from scratch. That's actually quite a time-consuming activity, especially if academics are being asked to do it and engage with this on top of their existing commitments. It also creates issues when it comes to maintenance of materials, because 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line, topics like computing science would have changed drastically, so you need to continually maintain. So if you're writing everything from scratch, you need to prepare for that maintenance phase. I prefer, and I have used, the wraparound model, and by that I mean we identify resources that are out there. You have created thousands of hours of study already in your repositories. You identify the most appropriate resources for your learning outcomes. They could be books, they could be videos, they could be audio, they could be links to other people's websites. It almost doesn't matter. Anything can be a resource. And what you do is you create an experience around these resources. You help guide students through the experience of learning. That could be done in-house, but that could be done by externals as well. At the very other end of the spectrum, the more risky, more adventurous end, you have students creating the content. A lot of our students are actually content creators. So, for example, you could say to them, go away, as part of their learning, you can say, go away and find 3 activities, 3 links, 3 references, critically evaluate them, bring them back, and share them with the group. If you have 5 students doing that, automatically you create a resource of 15 resources there, a bank of resources that have been critically evaluated. And again, an academic can also offer their view on this to see whether they are accurate, whether they are valid resources. So it's a completely other end of the spectrum. The wraparound model does provide assurances, and it also does provide more scalable options. But that takes me on to the notion of learning design. Instructional design, the discourse around instructional design in the UK has moved on to learning design. And by that I mean it's creating the learning experience around the content, very much to what you have started thinking about already here. If you think about it, we can use the analogy that the act of learning is similar to the act of dancing. And learning design is the choreography. We're telling students how to interact with each other, what resources they're going to use, what props, what sequences, and all of that will help them perform the learning activity together. So this is where we're focusing on at the moment in the UK. And there are a number of models that have started emerging in the literature. There's one from Ron Oliver and his colleagues at Edith Cowan University. He looks at learning tasks, and he says students learn by doing, and in order for them to engage effectively with those tasks, you need a number of resources, and there can be all sorts of resources, but you also need a number of learning supports alongside them. So he's got this 3-part model. where you can actually use that to design instructional materials. There's another model created by Dominique Verpoorten from the University of Liège, with also some Australian influences. And that model says students will actually engage in 8 types of activities. We're going to be asking them to experiment, to debate, to receive information, to explore, to practice, and we're going to ask them to reflect, to meta-learn, as they say. And by breaking those activities down into small sequences, you can actually design a learning experience that is meaningful and will help you identify the right technologies to use for that experience. Technology is everywhere. There's no point trying to keep up just with the technology. We're forever going to be moving forward. What we really need to focus on is the learning element. If we get our principles right, then we can choose technologies that are appropriate for whatever it is we want to need, whatever we need, whether we want our students to be creating knowledge, to be evaluating, to be understanding, remembering. Different technologies will be used for different purposes. So really, it's the principles of education we should be focusing on when we're creating content. The benefits of learning design. I talked about my model. I talked about a few other models. The benefits of the design is that they are useful communication tools. A course team can sit together with a learning technologist, with a subject librarian, with people from other institutions, jointly creating content, and they automatically have a common vocabulary. So they understand what it is, how they are structuring a learning experience. At the end of the day, a course team will need a working knowledge of a number of instructional design models. And you will use various bits that suit you, that suit your context. So an understanding of the wider models is actually important. They can be tailored to specific students and specific cohorts. So for example, I used my model on an MBA, Masters of Business Administration, that was delivered to a particular industry. It was shipping and logistics. So we used case studies. The module for strategy was the same for everyone. We used case studies for this industry. But then when we moved that and we offered it to another industry, we just added some case studies, again, looking at existing resources. But the design of how to engage with the resources was there, was common, was reusable. We were able to focus on it yet again. So in that respect, it's scalable and sustainable. That's the end of my presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Kirky. Due to shortage of time, I think we will take up the interactions in the next session. So now we move on to the next presenter, Professor Andrew from University of East London. Professor Andrew is a psychologist and learning technologist and is a professor of education in the Cass School of Education and Communities at the University of East London. He leads research into technology-enhanced transformational learning that has the interrelated foci of designing next-generation social media systems, deep learning design, performance-based and community learning, contemporary theory, and informal learning. He is currently the principal investigator on 4 funded national and international research projects in the Internet, radio, and social media, Radioactive UK and Radioactive Europe, and augmentative searching and learning, digging by debating, and digital dialogue games. Professor Andrew.
Okay, thank you. So, I'm just going to see my slide. What I'd like to do is broaden the perspective a little in my talk. As well as talking from a UK perspective, I'm also going to be talking from a European perspective, as I tend to work in a pan-European context and also a broader international context. I also do a lot of collaborative research on projects with people in Europe and the US. In fact, virtually all my work is national and international on collaborative research projects and related networks. So I'm very much speaking from that sort of perspective. Also, I'd like to emphasize that in this brief presentation, I can only make some key points that I will develop further and build upon as the workshop progresses. But I will give some publications at the end, and you can always check my website for more detail. Fortunately, my name is quite unusual, Andrew Ravenscroft, so if you do a search on me, you often get me first. Not because I'm fantastic, just because I've got an unusual name. So I should also like to signal in advance that myself, and I'm sure I'm speaking for my other UK colleagues here, we've tried to quickly assimilate the state of play here in India by just looking at the activities at CEC, IIITD and IGNU, so that we can adapt our presentations accordingly. But given the breadth and richness of what's going on here, this is quite a challenge. So I admit in advance that I'm doing my best, but this is a very difficult job. So what I'm going to do here, and I think this is a really useful complement to the detail and the excellent model an exemplar that Kyriaki showed, I'm going to provide a more holistic way to view instructional and learning design. Instead of describing instructional design methods, although I may do that in later sessions, instead I'm going to try to propose some important concepts for how we think about instructional and learning design. So to give you an overview of this talk, I'm going to speak from very much a research and development perspective. And with that in mind, I want to contextualize the talk in terms of the prevalent issue of how we design 21st century learning for 21st century skills. And in order to address that challenge, this is a neat follow-on from what Kyriaki was making. I think we need to move from the notion of instructional design more towards the notion of more active learning design. I'll then briefly talk about an approach that I've been working on for a few years with various colleagues called deep learning design, which is yet another variation on learning design, but I'll explain why that's relevant as I move on. And then what I would like to do is I've been trying to tie up where my work is going with some of the challenges here in India. So towards the end of the talk, I'll make some speculative connections with my work and what I've so far gleaned from the challenges facing the Indian context. And then what I'll do is when I take questions, I'll just put up some of my key publications in this area. So as I said, because I'm coming from very much a research-led perspective, I might constructively question things, and I might be providing what might be perceived as a critical voice, but that's my job because I'm a researcher. And a lot of the things I'm going to be talking about were key issues, and I was recently the programme chair for the European Conference on Technology Enhanced Learning, where the theme was, unsurprisingly, given my mention of it earlier, 21st century learning for 21st century skills. Now, why are we interested in this theme? Well, this theme is a key priority within the European Union and the UK and constituent countries worldwide, as research in instructional and learning design needs to address crucial contemporary questions, like how can schools prepare young people for the technology-rich workplace of the future? How can we use technology to promote more informal and independent learning outside of traditional educational settings? How can we use new generations of technologies like social and mobile technologies to promote learning? And more generally, how does or can technology transform education? I think the point I'm making, these are salient questions that we can't ignore if we're talking about the detail of learning or an instructional design. So this is my last slide before I get it, but I just want to say a little bit more about these 21st century skills because they're very, very important. We're now in a situation where our sort of young people and adults need to have new, more process-oriented, not just content-oriented, individual and collaborative skills. So things like critical and creative thinking, fast and responsive communication, problem-solving and reflection, flexibility and team working, these are becoming key skills that are needed in the contemporary workplace. So the modern world demands solving new problems in innovative ways, and often we're no longer performing predefined tasks that we're trained to do. And one way of looking at this, which is coined by Richard Noss from London Knowledge Lab, is at work now there tends to be a shift from material labour to more immaterial, weightless production. And if you don't believe me that this is important, one interesting example of why this approach of thinking about 21st century skills is important is the growth of the creative and digital industries in London, a sector for which these are key skills. And it's predicted that the city's financial sector is going to be overtaken by the creative and digital industries in the next 5 years. So that's it's quite staggering statistic, well, prediction. But critical to this developing economies are these new sorts of skills. So what I'd like to suggest is that, is following on from what Kyriaki said, we need to move from notions of instructional design more to notions of learning design. And in fact, I think the SCAPE, Kyriaki might agree, I think the SCAPE method that Kyriaki outlined, I think was a very good example of a learning design, actually, because it involved lots of active learning related to the student experience. So what this shift means is we need to reconcile the practices and knowledge of an institution and their courses with the reality of students' individual and collaborative experience of learning. And in this respect, there's two important things. Firstly, learning context can vary. Now they can be based in an institution. We can learn flexibly and at a distance. We can learn using mobile and personalised technologies. And we have a lot of informal learning in the workplace. This means increasingly we need to take into account the context in which learning takes place. Also, another important change that we can't ignore is students are developing new digital literacies, that we need to engage with and exploit. For example, the widespread use of social media like Twitter, Facebook and Skype have serious implications for the digital literacies and the discourse practices that students now operate. And as far as the latter is concerned, I've edited 2 journal special issues, particularly on this topic of how we design and evaluate social media for learning, and I'll give you those references at the end. Well, coming to this approach of deep learning design, I'll give you one of the key drivers behind this idea of deep learning design is that learning is fundamentally a psychological and educational concept. It's not just linked to technology and content. So to give you the more complicated definition, and then I'll explain it in simpler terms, deep learning design applies profound insights from the learning disciplines like psychology and learning science to exploit the affordances of technology in order to empower learners to achieve educational goals. Okay, that's a slightly complicated definition. But more practically, what this is saying is we need to clearly understand the learning problem or opportunity through clearly problematizing or understanding the learning situation. In other words, you need to understand the situation of the learners in order for the content to be effective in leading to learning, which means we need to pay greater attention to investigating and defining the learning context and these new learning contexts the students are actually operating in. And then when we've got a better understanding of these new and emerging learning contexts, we can design new technology enabled learning contexts. And if I can put that more simply, one way of looking at this approach is one of what you might call, this might appeal to the physical sciences, an educational engineering approach. So I'm arguing that learning design should actually design solutions for well understood educational problems or opportunities and not just be seen as delivering content. And to use an engineering analogy here, sort of, if you wanted to deliver a design bridge, you wouldn't deliver a design bridge based on easily observable characteristics of a landscape. Instead, you would thoroughly examine the landscape beforehand. You perform tests and experiments to define the requirements before building the bridge. And I know a bit about this because I used to be a metallurgist and quality control manager in a previous life. So that's a fairly brief overview, and I can expand on the approach, and also in my talks that follow I'm going to start talking about methodologies which realise this idea of deep learning design. But what I thought was more interesting was, as we say in the UK, putting my money where my mouth is. How can this approach of deep learning design sort of address some of the challenges that you're facing here in India? So, for example, how can this approach of deep learning design help to reach the unreached and address these problems of expansion, equity and excellence. And the first point is, I emphasise context being important. Well, the Indian learning context is very different from the UK, EU or US context. So any approach to learning design needs to clearly take that on board. And what I would argue is that we should carefully study and conceptualise the Indian learning context, especially those necessitating greater inclusion in the learning and educative process. And then once we've studied these contexts, we can design technology-enabled learning solutions through, I would argue, adapting existing approaches or introducing new ones. So it's very interesting being here at IGNU, because I used to work at the UK Open University. It's very interesting to see what orchestrations of technologies you use to promote learning. And maybe what I would argue is we need new blends of technologies. For example, adding mobile technologies to TV and radio to realise new and radical learning designs. Also, this is obviously very hard to do, but this idea of how we actually, I work in the area of technology-enabled inclusive learning. It's very hard. You know, we won't do it by just delivering content to these communities. We need to work with them. We need to see what they've got already. We need to design innovative, as Martin Bean said, we need to understand the context, then design pathways around the content in order to promote learning. But to take inspiration from Archimedes, give me a place to stand with a lever, I will move the whole world. And so I think if we grasp how difficult the problem is, we do have the intellectual and technological capacity to solve it. And just in case you needed a bit of help, we have perhaps this challenge is very much linked to ongoing research that I'm involved with in the UK and in various international networks. We've got a proposed international centre for public pedagogy. I say proposed, it's not been approved yet, so as we're on TV, I emphasise proposed, not approved. And in this centre, there's 2 co-directors, myself and another professor, there's 7 researchers. We're actually expanding 2 to be recruited. We've got 2 new members of staff, and we've got 2.25 million in research income from UK, EU, US international projects. We've got international collaborators, and we're very interested in people from India with this particular problem of how you include those so far excluded learners in education. And key relevant themes in this new international research centre are educational development for greater social justice. You know, we're interested in how we can achieve greater social justice through the expansion of education. We're interested in technology-enabled inclusive education, and we're also interested in ideas of citizenship within and beyond schools. So what I'm hoping this new international centre is, assuming we get it okayed by our bosses, it will be a vehicle for collaboration within a broader consortia, and it will be very sort of gratifying if some of the people here might want to be involved in that. So I'll finish there, and what I'll do, while we take some questions, I'll just leave you a list of the key publications that cover the work that I've spoken about, and I'd be more than willing to take any questions, so thank you.
Thank you, Professor Andrew. We may, if time permits, we may take up some questions at the end of the next session.
Okay, that's fine.
So right now we have shortage of time. Now I request Professor Deepak B. Pathak for his presentation. Professor Pathak did his MTech electrical engineering specialization in instrumentation control computers, and PhD thesis was on digital simulation and identification of linear continuous systems. This was in computer science from IIT Bombay. His research interests are in the areas of databases and information systems, software engineering, system performance evaluation, IT-enabled education, and IT strategy planning. Professor Pathak had his major contributions towards the development of aircraft maintenance training simulator, the smart car technology, the A-Clever project, and indigenous development of clicker devices. Listed amongst the 50 most influential Indians by Business Week 2009, Professor Phatak's dream is to see a resurgent India catching up with the world using information technology as the springboard. Professor Phatak.
Thank you. I must begin with a confession that I am no expert in instructional design. Of course, I am a teacher. I believe I am a good teacher, so I am going to speak about instructional design in the context of teaching and learning. And of course, I am going to speak in the context of 21st century education, which will be disrupted completely by web. As all of you know, web has been a disruptive influence everywhere. Businesses are done differently, and I believe that education and healthcare will be the next disruption. Many in the world agree with this. So let me begin by talking about some fundamental things. Learning, in my opinion, is proportional to the amount of thinking time spent by an active mind. Of course, there are several other factors. So grasping capabilities, aptitude, attitude, interest, attention, and the language that is used for learning teaching. What my contention is that given these things as fixed parameters for a student, then the amount of learning that student does will be directly proportional to the amount of quality time that he or she spends. About grasping capabilities and aptitude, these are inherited qualities, we may not be able to do much, but attitude, interest, attention and language is largely determined by the learning environment that is created. And I believe the instructional design plays an extremely important role in ensuring that these issues are handled. There is another fundamental problem. We do know that people are different, and therefore different people will learn at different pace and different people will learn differently. But we forget that the basic human intellectual capabilities of every human being are adequate to handle fairly complex logical problems. The example that I often quote is learning a foreign language, which is considered a difficult learning issue, and yet we forget that every human child learns a foreign language between the age of 3 years and 6 years, which is later on called the mother tongue of the child. And the child learns it without any instructional material, without any formal education system. Perhaps because of that, I believe that the fundamental reason is the attitude that a child possesses and displays. Tremendous curiosity, extraordinary boldness to ask questions vociferously, and tremendous perseverance. The child never ever gives up. The harder the problem, the child will be more at it. That is how a child learns a language, by perpetual attempt. This attitude later on, unfortunately, is shaped by exams and grades. So I would submit that no matter how good is your instructional material, no matter how good is your institution and teachers, if the students are primarily looking at education from exams and grades, at least in India we see that happening very often. My submission therefore is that we must enhance the quality time that is spent by each student. So given other factors, the quality time enhancement will also mean we enhance the attention, we enhance the interest, and we correct the attitude, because these all will contribute to the extra quality time. Good instructional material, again, I submit, is a cornerstone, but this, in my opinion, has to be looked at in a different context, in the context of the web. Interesting lectures is one way we try to ensure that quality time increases. But most important, in my opinion, at least that is what I have seen in the professional and engineering curriculum, is a lot of discussion sessions, tutorials, and challenging tasks. That is what makes learning happen. The formal educational system, again, this is my opinion, but I'm sure is shared by many. It guarantees a fixed time quantum. That is what is defined. There will be a semester-long course which will have 40 lecture hours. It will have so many tutorial hours. It will have 3-hour exams twice. So fixed time is being guaranteed for every participating student. The focus obviously is on completing the syllabus which is defined to be covered in that fixed time. Quality of time is not a focus. amount of time is not a focus. Since different people will learn at different pace, we must permit both the amount of time and the quality of that time to be enhanced, so that the system should guarantee a minimum knowledge quantum for each student. I believe an educational system is failure if it just guarantees a fixed time, because if a fixed knowledge amount is not guaranteed, then we will not achieve the outcome. So if a student fails in my class, I take it as my responsibility. I have not guaranteed the minimum education level to that student. That's how I think we must look at it. Of course, we solve these problems in different way. For example, reducing the passing grade point so that more people pass, etc., etc. But that cannot be reasonable. So what can web do? Amongst n number of things, most of which you will be familiar with, but in my opinion, it will permit students to enhance the amount of quality time that they spend. And it will permit an extraordinary role reversal, which I believe has already started happening, and unless we wake up to it, we might lose out sticking to our conventional ways. Conventional ways: classroom, lectures, homework, problem solving. The web way is homework, listen to pre-recorded lectures. And classroom, come here for discussions and problem solving. Why? Earlier, there is no choice but to listen to the lecture given by the teacher appointed for that purpose. Today, I have the best of the teachers giving best of the lectures accessible to me on the web. Look at the popularity of Khan Academy. Look at the popularity of courses like Coursera, where Professor Andrew Ying's lectures are pre-recorded, people can listen to those lectures. This reversal will prove to be extremely useful if teachers spend more and more time on discussions and problem solving. Professor Kannan Madgalia, my colleague, attempted this with his own lectures. He said, please listen to these lectures on this weekend and come prepared for the discussion and tutorial problems. Incidentally, every lecture hour will start with a quiz on whatever you have heard. So it was sort of making it compulsory. Instructional material now consists of textbooks, reference books, presentation slides, and the last one is not prescribed by the system but is what is mostly used by the students, guidebooks, because of the orientation of the exam. I would like to raise one question which is relevant to what I am going to say next. If I am a teacher, it is considered perfectly all right for me to use a textbook written by an expert. Human child learns a foreign language between the age of 3 years and 6 years, which is later on called the mother tongue of the child. And the child learns it without any instructional material, without any formal education system. Perhaps because of that, I believe that the fundamental reason is the attitude that a child possesses and displays. Tremendous curiosity, extraordinary boldness to ask questions vociferously, and tremendous perseverance. The child never ever gives up. The harder the problem, the child will be more at it. That is how a child learns a language, by perpetual attempt. This attitude later on, unfortunately, is shaped by exams and grades. So I would submit that no matter how good is your instructional material, no matter how good is your institution and teachers, if the students are primarily looking at education from exams and grades, at least in India we see that happening very often. My submission therefore is that we must enhance the quality time that is spent by each student. So given other factors, the quality time enhancement will also mean we enhance the attention, we enhance the interest, and we correct the attitude, because these all will contribute to the extra quality time. Good instructional material, again, I submit, is a cornerstone, but this, in my opinion, has to be looked at in a different context, in the context of the web. Interesting lectures is one way we try to ensure that quality time increases. But most important, in my opinion, at least that is what I have seen in the professional and engineering curriculum, is a lot of discussion sessions, tutorials, and challenging tasks. That is what makes learning happen. The formal educational system, again, this is my opinion, but I'm sure is shared by many. It guarantees a fixed time quantum. That is what is defined. There will be a semester long course which will have 40 lecture hours. It will have so many tutorial hours. It will have 3-hour exams twice. So fixed time is being guaranteed for every participating student. The focus obviously is on completing the syllabus which is defined to be covered in that fixed time. Quality of time is not a focus. Amount of time is not a focus. Since different people will learn at different pace, we must permit both the amount of time and the quality of that time to be enhanced, so that the system should guarantee a minimum knowledge quantum for each student. I believe an educational system is failure if it just guarantees a fixed time, because if a fixed knowledge amount is not guaranteed, then we will not achieve the outcome. So if a student fails in my class, I take it as my responsibility. I have not guaranteed the minimum education level to that student. That's how I think we must look at it. Of course, we solve these problems in different way. For example, reducing the passing grade point so that more people pass, etc., etc. But that cannot be reasonable. So what can web do? Amongst n number of things, most of which you will be familiar with, but in my opinion, it will permit students to enhance the amount of quality time that they spend. And it will permit an extraordinary role reversal, which I believe has already started happening, and unless we wake up to it, we might lose out sticking to our conventional ways. Conventional ways: classroom, lectures, homework, problem solving. The web way is homework, listen to pre-recorded lectures. And classroom, come here for discussions and problem solving. Why? Earlier, there was no choice but to listen to the lecture given by the teacher appointed for that purpose. Today, I have the best of the teachers giving best of the lectures accessible to me on the web. Look at the popularity of Khan Academy. Look at the popularity of courses like Coursera, where Professor Andrew Ying's lectures are pre-recorded. People can listen to those lectures. This reversal will prove to be extremely useful if teachers spend more and more time on discussions and problem solving. Professor Kannan Madgalia, my colleague, attempted this with his own lectures. He said, please listen to these lectures on this weekend and come prepared for the discussion and tutorial problems. Incidentally, every lecture hour will start with a quiz on whatever you have heard. So it was sort of making it compulsory. Instructional material now consists of textbooks, reference books, presentation slides, and the last one is not prescribed by the system but is what is mostly used by the students, guidebooks, because of the orientation of the exam. I would like to raise one question which is relevant to what I am going to say next. If I am a teacher, it is considered perfectly all right for me to use a textbook written by an expert. Let's say Mr. Sinha is an expert in a subject and he has written a book. It is prescribed, in fact, that I should use textbook. In fact, therefore, the system permits me to let my students study the book written by him and let me use those contents. The new instructional material will be video books. Why can't I extend that and say, Mr. Educational System, permit me to use all his lectures as the textbook. Permit my students to listen to lectures given by him. Free me from the burden of giving 40 lectures which are anyway not liked by the students because they all anyway listen to his lectures on the net. But now permit me to use that excellent material, excellent lectures, to use that in my classroom to solve problems, have discussions and so on. Animations is something which is possible only on the web or on the digital content. It's not possible elsewhere. Spoken tutorials, I believe Professor Kannan will speak about it tomorrow, but we have experimented with it. Audio video guides will of course appear to compensate for lack of conventional guides in this context. There is one more thing. 1 hour lecture has been for some reason a standard. I looked on the web. I see everywhere in all countries of the world 1 hour lecture is a standard sort of I don't understand this. In the web world, particularly when individuals are going to listen to these lectures, the attention span is often defined by the media people better, and that is about 7.5 minutes. So a 10-minute lecture would probably make much more sense in that context. Evaluation and assessment is an important aspect of educational system. We conduct quizzes and tests, we have written examinations, we have home assignments, and of course we have Viva Voce. Online examinations will now be more popular. Andrew Young told me that his machine learning course was taken by 1,20,000 students across the world. 85,000 took online assignments, and 85,000 students' assignments were graded online. For each individual assignment, the grades were known immediately after completion of this. There would of course be group assignments in small groups and simulation games. These will become perhaps the important educational instructional material in future. Automated correction and peer evaluation will become the order of the day, particularly when the numbers increase so much. In fact, IGNOU itself has so many large number of students. I am curious to know how exactly is the evaluation handled. The conventional way of handling evaluation is going to be very difficult. There is one worry that I have is that the web-based education is clearly making the ability of written articulation suffer a lot. Most of our students in professional colleges do a cut and paste job. Thankfully, Wikipedia is full of all kinds of information that you need, and more teachers in my institute at least are spending more time to figure out what people have copied from where and when. A teacher is still a cornerstone. Just because the great video lectures are available on the web does not mean that the role of the teacher diminishes. Teacher is a very special thing of human species. No other species have this teacher. Human species created teacher as an institution to handle all aspects of knowledge, including knowledge generation in the next level of species. To support these teachers, we created support structures. Traditionally, they were called temples, mosques. Nowadays, they are called colleges and universities. There is one thing which bothers me. All the while, teacher as an institution was always recognized at the helm of affairs. Today, these support structures have become institutions. Indian Institute of Technology, this university, and the teacher is now a paid employee of these institutions. I submit that a paid employee has a drastically different behavior and the sense of responsibility than an institution. And I think we need to recreate this feeling of being an institution in every teacher. That's very, very critical. A teacher is always needed, no matter whether it is web-based or whatever it is. So teacher empowerment should be a fundamental, should I say, need of the 21st century, much greater than the need for empowering teachers earlier, because the role of the teachers will be different. I will conclude by saying that currently I am engaged, thanks to the National Mission Project, in only looking at teacher empowerment. This is the new tool that we use. We believe that this is the world's most inexpensive tablet computer, Akash, and I am so happy and proud to show it to you when the creator of Akash is present here. He has been the conceptualizer and the creator. We at the Institute of at Bombay had an opportunity to work on this to create some educational contents. I don't know whether you can focus on this, just to show the people. What I have here is an example of an application which is normally not seen in a tablet. This is a C program, and this is the execution results of the C program. So we have actually tried to demonstrate that this is not just an access device, it's a full-fledged computer by putting in a full-fledged computing environment. There are many more things to do, but for the lack of time I will not go ahead. I will only submit that I feel the need to know more about instructional design, because without I know what instructional design is and how it is handled, I will not be able to train my teachers in the ways of the new instructions and the design of those new instructions which are required. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Vatik. Now I request Professor Mangal Sundar Krishnan to present.
Have I eaten all your time?
You are a teacher.
Professor Mangal Sundar is a professor of chemistry at Indian Institute of Technology, Madras, a native of Tirunelveli, district of Tamil Nadu. He obtained his PhD in theoretical chemistry from McGill University, Montreal, Canada in 1988 and pursued his postdoctoral studies in several fields of theoretical chemistry in major universities in Canada before joining IIT Madras. He has published his research in several areas of theoretical chemistry such as theory of nuclear magnetic resonance, molecular spectroscopy, and computational chemistry. He has also been the National Web Courses Coordinator for the National Program on Technology and Enhanced Learning, and that is in short NPTEL, which is under the National Mission on Education through ICT, NME-ICT, since 2003. Yeah, Professor Pangasindra, please.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak a little bit. The presentation is for you to read later. I won't go through that. The purpose here is to synchronize this presentation and some aspects of the NPTEL project with the focus of the workshop, which is the design and also building educational resources. Okay, NPTEL, as you are familiar with, is a mission supported and earlier MHRD funded national program on technology enhanced learning. Thanks to Professor Pathak, who as a teacher spoke, I must follow him. I'm also a teacher in the Department of Chemistry in the Indian Institute of Technology. The focus here is to build supplementary educational materials. A teacher replaced educational system is like a parent replaced family system. I think this quotation is given by somebody else. I must tell you that it's not possible for us to obviate teachers, but it's possible to obviate a lot of so-called teachers who are not in the profession for the sake of it. NPTEL as a program started only with the idea of providing supplementary educational learning materials to a very large number of institutions which were growing in India at the time, but unfortunately not being able to find a large number of qualified teachers. So we have a repository today on the internet with a little more than 500 and odd number of courses. The so-called 40 lecture, 1 hour lecture set of courses. There is a curriculum design, there is a peer review, and there is a learning program. But all these things would only create one set of repositories, and it's important for the community, the 21st century learner, to learn through various means of using some of these special lectures. The courses contain, I'll quickly go to the slide which focuses on what we do. The phases, the current phases of NPTEL hope to provide a very large number of course-based contents which are either web-based lecture notes or video lectures in an organized form, and they also contain hopefully a considerable number of animations and visual illustrations or video demonstrations, etc., which the teacher can individually use without having to take it out of a lecture. These are provided as reusable objects or learning objects for those who want to integrate it in their own way of learning. We also encourage a very large number of people to contribute in the form of a wiki development, but an educated and a peer-reviewed wiki. It's not an open-ended wiki. At the end of the day, the students need to have problems and quizzes and assignments and evaluation as part of a feedback for their own learning and also as a process of certification. So all these things are being integrated to a very large number of students and teachers in the country. The paradigms are different, the pedagogies are different if you are designing a course for supplementing a teacher knowledge versus supplementing a student's own learning. But at this point of time, we have so many teachers who are not necessarily in the higher education sphere, and even a very much larger fraction of students. What is happening is creation of a very large number of open educational resources under this one banner. Practically in all of the engineering and basic sciences, the program is inviting the possibly the best teachers as well as the teachers who are enthusiastic and who would contribute to the process of creation of courses. Now, where are we heading to this, what is important for us? The NPTEL website contains all these information about the courses. They are all free in the spirit of what Mr. Sinha mentioned. They are under the Creative Commons license. You can do whatever you want to do with it, teach, use parts of it, use the whole of it, replace the classroom with lectures by somebody else. In fact, I do my lectures ahead of time, record them in the studio, and my classes are conducted with the students having looked at the lectures before they come to the class. And precisely what Professor Pathak mentioned, I hand over small quizzes for them to do as a group in the class, not necessarily examinations. They seem to have enjoyed the fact that finally they have only 2 exams to do, but all their classes are interactive classes, and the students learn from them. I don't lecture at all, but I explain the concepts behind the lectures. I provide anecdotes, I provide video links to other materials, and essentially enhance the learning, which will be focused in their own hostel rooms or in their own environments that they choose to. They've got 2 days to listen to a lecture instead of a 40 minutes that they are forced to sit in the class. The class is purely a discussion hour. I think in general we can enhance this kind of learning processes in all the universities where we use resources which are created under NPTEL and NMB ICT. Now let me summarize the directions where we are moving to. The project, with the help of the ministry and with the help of the support of the national mission, will hopefully continue to build many more courses. There are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of courses in many disciplines which we haven't still covered in science. The second aspect is to bring in partners and teachers who are not just from the IITs or the Indian Institute of Science, but many other institutions to contribute to this. Knowledge is everywhere. It's important that the best of any subject expert is available under this project. So we are inviting, rather in an open-ended fashion, experts to contribute subject matter. However, subject to some curriculum design, preferably a higher education Indian university or an Indian institution curriculum as a start, and then build other learning repositories to that. We are about to start a certification program, a very large certification program in particularly the IT area, where the need for a much larger number of IT knowledgeable graduates has been provided by both NASCOM and also the other industries, IT industries. This certification is being done with the help of these partner industries, and the numbers could be anywhere between 200,000 to 500,000 over the next 1 or 2 years on specific topics in the area of IT, particularly on programming, data structures and algorithms, which seem to be identified as the most important areas by the IT industries where knowledge is essential. We are creating similar certification programs in all the other areas, but this large number requirement is something that we are working very seriously now. Learning without borders is another area where the specialists are being invited to give lectures on specific topics, not on a course-based model, but on an open-ended research model, and these being experts, the peer review happens automatically with the students as well as with the other listeners. These are limited to any number of lectures that the experts would decide as sufficient for introduction to the research area. There is a very large feedback-driven program. The users of this project are now being contacted by different feedback mechanisms for feedback into the system as to what is missing. How do we build a course map like a Google map in moving from point A to point B through a directional process? The course maps are not as simple as a point map, but you do need modular instructional processes. All the modules which are needed for going from any particular background to any particular level of expertise or skill at the end of the program, we are trying to design that in the engineering and the sciences discipline, which means many more courses need to be added, many more processes need to be put in place. And of course, teacher empowerment and teacher training is a major area of this project. This is the Indian effort at this point that I have summarized. The Indian perspective is very simple. I think it's the same as what David Merrill said many, many years ago, that instruction is not information. I think it's very important for us to understand the process of learning versus the process of knowing a lot of information. And I think it is important for the teachers of this country and teachers of any other nation willing to participate in this large exercise. As Mr. Sinha said, funding is not the issue, it is how we can educate 1 billion people. And please remember, that's 1/6 of the world, and therefore pretty much all the problems of the world are already here. And if we understand how to solve these billions, I'm sure we solve all the problems of everybody else, and that cannot be done individually, has to be done collectively. So I'll end with this one last slide, where some of these objectives are stated in some form. At the end of all of this, we hope that NPTEL, as a part of a technology enhanced learning, does the following: promote critical thinking by the students, namely enhancing their knowledge. That's what is TE is for. The visualization and visualizability of concepts, thanks to the 3D and the even probably multi-D technologies and the ease with which today people can create animations and videos and so on. So visualization is important. Demonstration and hands-on experience through online labs, which is also a part of the National Mission Project through what is known as the Virtual Labs Project. The British Council team has already seen the IIT Delhi effort on this through a collaboration with 20 institutions. We would like to integrate teaching and learning in synchronization with the environment of the individual, which is, I mean, it can be a child, student, adult, all-time learners, but as higher education faculty, we probably would look at the higher education sphere and transfer the expertise to any other sector. Mass education, obviously this country has the GER of less than 14%, and therefore it's very important for us to reach out to many more people who can join, who are unable to join at this point of time, but who can join the process of education and replace or fulfill the lack of physical infrastructure and teachers through the web. Building competitiveness and thinking out of the box at an early age by providing these facilities to anyone and everyone. And most importantly, of course, as he said, no talent should be wasted, which I said in a different way, building a nation to its fullest capacity, a nation as large as India with 1/6 of the world population. And I've already said that solve all the problems of this country, and I'm sure solutions for everybody will come out of it anyway. Thank you very much, and I look forward to discussions on this and other problems.
Thank you, Professor Mangasundar. With this, we conclude the session, and I thank all the speakers of this session. We'll take a break of 2 minutes so that we change over to the next session with 2 speakers and that. Thank you very much.